Hello, my awesome fourth grade artist. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this landscape picture. This is a picture of the ocean, and I'm going to show you how to create the design, how to draw it and everything, and then I'm going to show you some techniques for adding color to it. So the materials that you'll need for this are, you'll need paper, and I'm going to show today how to use the technique using wet markers, adding water to your markers to turn them into a watercolor. So if you use that, you'll need a thicker paper. Like I'm using watercolor paper for this. Watercolor paper, they've got that at Hobby Lobby. You could use a thicker mixed media paper. It's just more like poster board thickness. You could even get a piece of poster board and cut it down and make it smaller. But just if you do the poster board, use the rough side, because if you use the slick side, all the water will just slide right off of it. If you don't have paper like that, you could just use some regular copy paper, but instead of using the wet marker technique, you would just color in your designs with crayons and markers, and I promise you it would look fabulous and be great. So just whatever you have on hand at home. You'll also need, like I said, markers. You'll need some water and a paintbrush if you're going to do the technique I'm doing, or if you don't have a paintbrush, you could just try Q-tip. So also, if you have crayons and you're not going to use the wet marker, you can use crayons with this, colored pencils, just whatever you have. So this piece of artwork that we're going to do is inspired by the artwork of Robin Mead. Let me show you a little bit about Robin Mead. Robin Mead is a contemporary artist from America. And a contemporary artist is just an artist that is still alive and working. So she's still alive, she makes these designs, and she works in watercolor. This is an example of one of her watercolor drawings. She does digital art. So digital art is when you use computers, or you might use an iPad to make art. Lots of artists use those kind of media for making art. And then she also works with mixed media. So that's when you're combining different materials. You're not just using all watercolor or all marker. You combine materials to make your picture. And before she was an artist, she was a social worker. And so she worked with people and helped them get through different situations, different problems they had. But then she started spending more and more time creating art, and she said it just made her life so happy and so positive. And all of her paintings use bright colors. They just make me very happy to look at them. So in this one, something we're going to really be talking about today is foreground, middle ground, and background. When you're doing a landscape, this is a landscape, it's a picture of the ocean, you need to think about your foreground, your middle ground, and your background. So your foreground is the very front, the part that's closest to the viewer. So in this picture, the foreground would be these waves, these big crashing waves, and then these softer waves. This is in the front, this is what is closest to you. The middle ground is just what's in the middle. So in the middle of this one, behind the ocean, you see land. She's got some hills, maybe some little tiny mountains. And I love how she's put this pattern inside these. It gives variety, it breaks up these spaces, and it also creates a texture in there. So I love that, and we're going to be using that. And then the background is the part that's the farthest from you. So in this one, it would be the sun. Foreground, middle ground, and background. And it's good to have those three sections and think about how you're going to use them. So this artist uses lots of elements of art. She uses line. You can see all of her lines, and she likes to outline her areas in these thick, bold black lines. Some are thicker than others, so she has some very thick ones here up front, and these are thinner as you get to the back, and that's good again for variety. Not all of her lines are the same. Things in front in your foreground will often be more detailed. The colors will be more vibrant because that's the closest part to you. So you can soften things as you go into the middle ground and the background. She also used color. So you see she has a contrast between warm and cool colors. So her foreground and her middle ground, she's used cool colors. Cool colors are colors that make us think of things that are cold and cool, like ice. So she's used blues and greens and purples in these two areas. And then warm colors are colors that make us think of things that are warm, like the sun and fire. So oranges and reds and yellows in this section. And that gives us contrast. If it were all the same, things just wouldn't stand out so much. So that's a good thing to have. All right, so I'm going to start by showing you how to draw this landscape. So you're going to get your piece of paper, and I'm using a watercolor piece of paper like I told you, and I'm going to draw with a Sharpie because later on when I add my water, a Sharpie's a permanent marker and it won't run and bleed. So you can either, if you don't want to start out with a Sharpie or a permanent marker, you can draw this with a pencil, then add your color, and then later go back and outline it with a regular magic marker if you don't have a Sharpie. That will be fine, but I want you to be able to see what I'm drawing, so I'm using a Sharpie. So we're going to start in our foreground. Remember, that's the very front, the closest part to us, and so it will overlap all of the other sections. So we need to draw it first. It's the closest, it's what really stands out. So we're going to draw some waves. So I'm going to start over here on the left side, and I'm going to make some spirals that will be waves. You decide how big you want yours to be, and you don't have to make, you could have a whole bunch of spirally waves that go through, a big one, and then some softer waves. You decide how you want yours to be. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine. So I'm going to start over here, and remember, it's good to trace with your finger first and kind of plan out what you're going to do. So I'm going to make a big spiral that goes around, and it's just going to go off the page. Okay, that's one of my waves. And then I'm going to make it start kind of in the middle at the bottom and kind of go down. So that looks like a wave. We see lots of movement we're creating with this. And then over here I'm going to make another one, and instead of making it exactly the same, because waves crash all over the place, they're not all the same, I'm going to make one a little bit higher up. So I'm going to make another spiral. Remember, yours doesn't have to look just like mine, and it's just going to run into that one, and then when it comes out, I think I'll make it go into a wave. So I'm going to come out, and then I'm just going to make a soft wave. Isn't that how it is at the ocean? The waves just kind of go in, and then they go fast, and then they turn and flip all over the place. And then I think I'll have one more tiny one down here. So this one's just going to run into that one and then come out on that. Okay, so there's my three waves. Now you can make yours however you want. If you wanted to make some going that way, that's fine. So I'm going to come up a little bit, and I'm going to make a few more softer wavy lines. So this one, you'll recognize this when we draw waves. A lot of times we draw lines like this, don't we? And I'm going to make one more, and it's just going to be like a curved, softer curved line. Okay. So there's some water. Now it's time, this is all my foreground. Now I'm going to work on my middle ground. So my middle ground is going to be those green hills, and you can decide, do you want big mountains, or do you want softer hills, or just like a nice straight green landscape or horizon line. That's your decision. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm just going to make some wavy lines. I've just got some soft hills here. I'm going to come out here. I've got to remember, though, that that's my middle ground. It'll be green because it'll be the land, so I'll have to remember that. So you remember I showed you, let me show you this. This was hers, where her middle ground starts. Remember how she put these lines that curve and make patterns? We can do something like that in ours, and that'll really give it a little texture and give it some more variety. So she did hers like this, where she just made these lines, and they get larger and larger. But I'm going to make a different kind. So you do whatever kind you want. I think I'm going to start, and I'm just going to make these lines that kind of follow the original line I made. See how I'm making these curved lines? And I'm just going to fill up that space. At some point it's going to run into that bottom one, so you have to just kind of let that overlap. These waves overlap that. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just kind of making them go just like that, but we go down a little bit each time. So you can make whatever kind of line pattern you want in yours. You can make circles, do that however you want. And then I think I'll add a few more little hills back here. This may be, I may make that later a different shade of green. So all of this area is going to be my middle ground, and that will be painted different shades of green or colored in different shades of green. All right, now it's time to add my sun, and I want a big sun. Remember, this is Robin Mead's piece of artwork. It's called Land's End, and so she's got a big sun, and we're just gonna make like a half circle, a semicircle here, because the sun is setting down behind the landscape, behind our horizon. All right, so I'm gonna start just somewhere, wherever you want, and I'm gonna make my curved shape. I'm in a big sun, and then we're gonna make the rays that go out. Robin Mead made her rays kind of these little squiggly lines. I'm gonna make mine straight, but you can make yours squiggly and straight and squiggly and straight, or you could do yours however you want. I really like it when they're different. So I'm gonna turn my paper a little. Sometimes you'll find it's easy to turn your paper to help you draw. And I'm just gonna start making these straight lines that are gonna radiate around my sun. Okay, now I'm gonna turn my paper as I go. And I bet y'all been drawing suns for a long time, so you kind of already have an idea of how you're going to draw your sun. Okay. All right, so now we have our drawing. So if you drew it in pencil, you can just leave it in pencil for right now, and we'll add color. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the technique where you use the wet markers. So I'm going to start in the ocean area, and remember, we're going to use cool colors in our foreground and middle ground. So my foreground is going to be shades of blues and purples. So I'm going to start with this turquoise color. You can start with whatever color you want, and I'm just going to, because I like the look of it, this was mine again, where the edges are kind of darker and it gets lighter as you go inside. So to do that, we just go around our edges of where we drew. You don't have to be very neat with this because you're going to be adding the water. And I'm just kind of going around and outlining. I'm kind of coloring and outlining at the same time. But you don't have to color in a whole lot. That paint, that water is going to turn this into paint almost, and it'll just really spread. So I'll go on the outside here. I'm outlining the outside and inside of the line. And then I think I'll even go down there and do that outline. And I've created a shape now. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is add some water. So I've got my brush here. Let me scoot this over a little bit. I have a paper towel in case I need to wipe my brush. And in between colors, when you change colors, you need to clean your brush off. You need to rinse it out in your water and dry it off. And then if your water starts to get really gross and lots of colors mixed together, you might need to change it out. So I'm going to dip it in the water, and then I'm going to come over and just start painting. And look how pretty that is. It's almost like magic. I just paint over it, and when your brush starts to get dry and scratchy, you need to get some more water. You don't really need too much water. You don't want big puddles. But that just moves that marker around, and it turns it into watercolor. So pretty, and you just let it dry however it dries. It doesn't have to be smooth. That gives you that watercolor effect. Just go in and fill it all in. My brush is getting a little scratchy, so I'm going to add some more water. So if you want to do yours this way, if you have the right kind of paper for doing that, then you would go in everywhere in your drawing, and you would add the marker color outline, and then you would go in with your wet paintbrush. Let me show you. So this was my finished one, remember? So you see, again, I used all cool colors in the foreground and middle ground. When I got to the middle ground, I used 2 different shades of green, and that was good because it gives you the sense that these darker green ones are behind these lighter green ones. So think about that. I also tried to paint some of my stripes darker just to give a little more variety. And then your background needs to be warm colors. So I used a pattern of different warm colors in the background. Now, after I was finished, I went back with my Sharpie again and I outlined, you can see here, you can see how much thicker these lines are than those. So I went back over everything with my Sharpie marker and made my lines thicker, and that really makes it look even better. It really gives contrast to your colors and makes them stand out. So you can just use a regular Sharpie and just go around and make your lines thicker and bigger, or if you had a fatter tip Sharpie, you could use that also. All my lines, on these lines, I left those skinny though, just to still have some more variety. If you don't have the thick paper and you can't do the markers and the water, you can just color this with crayons, or you could color it with markers. Just make sure you're adding a nice thick black line around everything, because that's how Robin Mead did her artwork, and that's going to really make it look good and really make it stand out. There's our Robin Mead piece. So I'm going to leave you with that. I hope you'll email me what you've done. I can't wait to see. Have fun. Bye.